Years after Michael Jackson's death, an estate investigator reviewing old Neverland Ranch records reportedly came across a note attached to a maintenance file. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't detailed. It was only a brief instruction. Yet it immediately stood out because it referenced a building almost nobody remembered. The note simply stated that access was restricted and that entry required direct authorization. At first glance, it seemed insignificant. Large properties often contain secured areas. But the more records they examined, the stranger things became. Utility reports referenced the structure. Security logs mentioned it repeatedly. Maintenance crews documented exterior inspections. Yet almost nobody appeared to have gone inside. Even more surprising, photographs of the building were remarkably scarce. For a place located on one of the most famous private properties in America, it seemed strangely invisible. Former employees remembered seeing it. Security staff recalled instructions regarding it. A few longtime associates vaguely remembered Michael visiting it personally. But when investigators began asking what exactly was inside, answers became frustratingly inconsistent. Some believed it stored vehicles. Others thought it contained personal belongings. A few insisted it housed creative materials Michael never wanted disturbed. Nobody could agree. That uncertainty transformed an ordinary review into something much larger. Because by that point, more than a decade had passed since Michael Jackson's death. Most people assumed every meaningful corner of Neverland had already been explored. Every important artifact catalogued. Every significant possession accounted for. Yet here was a building that seemed to exist outside the normal history of the estate. The deeper investigators looked, the more it felt as though an entire chapter of Michael's life had quietly slipped through the cracks. As word spread among those involved in the review, curiosity intensified. Why had this structure remained largely untouched while the rest of the property underwent countless inspections? Why did security references appear so frequently? And why did people who knew about the building seem reluctant to discuss it in detail? The questions multiplied with every document. Eventually, the decision was made. The building would finally be opened, examined, and documented. Nobody involved realized they were about to uncover something that would completely change the way many people understood Michael Jackson's private world. By the time specialists arrived at the structure, expectations had grown enormously. Years of mystery naturally invite speculation, and speculation had flourished. Some imagined hidden recordings. Others envisioned priceless collectibles. Rumors circulated about secret projects, personal archives, and unreleased material. Yet the building itself appeared surprisingly ordinary. It sat quietly away from the attention once focused on Neverland's more famous attractions. There were no dramatic signs. No clues hinting at extraordinary contents. From the outside, it looked almost forgettable. That only made the security measures more puzzling. Investigators quickly discovered that access was far more complicated than anticipated. Layers of protection had been added over time. Reinforced mechanisms remained in place. Several systems appeared customized rather than standard. It felt excessive for a simple storage facility. Hours passed before meaningful progress occurred. Every obstacle only fueled curiosity further. What inside could possibly justify this level of protection? Eventually, after considerable effort, the final barrier moved. The doors opened slowly, revealing darkness untouched for years. Flashlights swept across the interior. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The silence wasn't caused by shock. It was caused by confusion. Instead of the dramatic discovery many expected, investigators saw rows of vehicles resting motionless in the shadows. At first glance, it appeared they had found nothing more than a garage. Some observers even felt disappointed. After years of rumors, could the mystery really end with a collection of cars? Then the lights came on. Everything changed. Dust covered surfaces, but beneath it sat an astonishingly preserved world. Chrome gleamed. Paint reflected light. Leather interiors appeared almost untouched by time. Tires remained inflated. Details remained exactly as they had been left years earlier. The vehicles looked less like abandoned possessions and more like exhibits inside a museum frozen in a single moment. Suddenly investigators realized they weren't standing inside a garage. They were standing inside a time capsule. And the deeper they explored, the more extraordinary the story became. What immediately fascinated investigators wasn't the value of the vehicles but the way they were arranged. Most celebrity collections follow predictable patterns. Cars are organized by brand, value, rarity, or convenience. This collection seemed different. Certain vehicles appeared connected to specific periods of Michael's life. Others reflected dramatic shifts in his career. Registration records, purchase dates, and historical references gradually revealed a pattern. The collection resembled a timeline. A luxury vehicle associated with one era sat near another connected to a completely different chapter. Together they formed a physical journey through decades of fame, reinvention, triumph, pressure, and creativity. The realization transformed how investigators viewed everything around them. They were no longer looking at transportation. They were looking at memories. One vehicle reflected the years when Michael dominated popular culture unlike any entertainer before him. Another connected to a period marked by artistic experimentation and enormous ambition. Others appeared linked to times when privacy became increasingly important. The arrangement suggested someone who viewed these objects as markers of personal history rather than symbols of wealth. That distinction mattered. Public conversations about Michael Jackson often focused on spectacle. Stadium performances, record-breaking albums, global fame. Yet this collection revealed something more intimate. It showed how he remembered his own journey. Not through trophies or awards, but through experiences attached to specific moments in time. The deeper investigators moved through the garage, the more obvious the emotional dimension became. Some vehicles contained personal touches that transformed them from luxury items into private spaces. Notes remained tucked away. Accessories occupied familiar locations. Small details suggested repeated use rather than occasional display. These weren't possessions acquired merely for status. They were environments. Sanctuaries. Places where Michael could escape the relentless demands of public life. And nowhere was that reality more visible than in one vehicle nobody expected to matter. At first, the van attracted little attention. Compared to the luxury automobile surrounding it, the vehicle appeared almost laughably ordinary. Its exterior lacked the glamour associated with celebrity collections. No custom paint. No obvious extravagance. Nothing about it suggested significance. Investigators initially assumed it belonged to staff or support personnel. Then they opened the door. Instantly, perceptions changed. The interior had been transformed into something entirely different. Custom seating created a comfortable private environment. Entertainment systems were carefully integrated. Storage compartments lined the walls. The space felt less like transportation and more like a mobile retreat. It became increasingly clear that this vehicle served a special purpose. Here was a place where Michael could think, create, relax, and escape. But the most important discovery wasn't the design. It was what investigators found inside. Hidden among compartments and storage areas sat notebooks, folders, sketches, and creative materials unlike anything they expected. Suddenly the investigation shifted away from vehicles and toward ideas. Hundreds of pages documented concepts, plans, and visions that never reached the public. Some focused on entertainment. Others explored education. A few appeared almost impossible to categorize. They represented imagination in its rawest form. Sketches existed beside handwritten notes. Concepts evolved across multiple drafts. Margins contained sudden inspirations recorded before they could disappear. Reading through the material felt like watching creativity happen in real time. More importantly, it challenged assumptions about Michael's later years. Many people viewed that period through the lens of controversy and struggle. These documents revealed someone still thinking constantly about the future. New experiences. New productions. New possibilities. The creativity hadn't slowed. If anything, it appeared more ambitious than ever. The discovery transformed the garage from a collection of possessions into a vault of unfinished dreams. Every page hinted at futures audiences never experienced. Every sketch suggested projects that might have changed the trajectory of entertainment itself. And investigators had only begun uncovering what the building contained. As archivists examined the material more closely, they discovered extensive planning documents unlike anything previously associated with Michael Jackson. Entire folders contained detailed blueprints for productions that appeared extraordinarily ambitious. These weren't rough concepts scribbled on scraps of paper. Many looked highly developed. Technical notes accompanied artistic sketches. Stage designs incorporated technologies that were uncommon or unavailable at the time. Audience participation played a central role in several concepts. Rather than simply performing for spectators, Michael appeared interested in creating immersive experiences that surrounded participants with storytelling, music, visual effects, and emotion. Some projects resembled elaborate fantasy worlds. Others focused on education and creativity. Repeatedly, investigators encountered the same theme: imagination as a transformative force. The material suggested Michael remained deeply committed to inspiring people rather than merely entertaining them. Several plans referenced children directly. A single sentence changed everything. Others emphasized wonder, curiosity, and exploration. It was striking how often these ideas appeared throughout unrelated projects. Even concepts separated by years shared common philosophical foundations. The discovery painted a picture of remarkable consistency. Publicly, Michael Jackson reinvented himself repeatedly across different eras. Privately, his core mission appeared surprisingly stable. He wanted to create experiences that made people dream bigger. That objective echoed throughout the documents. What fascinated investigators most was the sheer volume of material. The garage wasn't preserving one unfinished project. It was preserving dozens. Some consisted of only a few pages. Others filled entire folders. Together, they revealed a creative engine that never stopped running. Every completed achievement seemed to generate several new ideas. Every finished project inspired another beginning. Looking through the material, it became impossible to view Michael simply as a performer. He emerged instead as a relentless creator, constantly searching for new ways to communicate ideas. Yet among all the plans, sketches, and blueprints, investigators eventually found something even more revealing. Unlike the formal documents, these discoveries carried no intention of public presentation. They were private reflections, personal thoughts, and they offered perhaps the clearest glimpse yet into the individual behind the legend. The notebooks were small, unremarkable, and easy to overlook. Yet once archivists began reading them, they quickly became the most discussed discovery in the entire building. Unlike polished plans designed for collaborators, these writings felt spontaneous and deeply personal. Pages contained observations recorded in moments of inspiration. Questions appeared beside rough sketches. Goals shared space with worries. Some entries focused on future projects. Others reflected on childhood memories, family relationships, and life experiences. What surprised readers most was how ordinary many thoughts seemed. Public fame often creates the illusion that celebrities exist in a separate reality. These notebooks suggested otherwise. Michael worried about unfinished work. He reflected on mistakes. He explored ideas without certainty. He questioned himself. Again and again, one subject appeared throughout the pages. Legacy. Not fame. Not money. Not popularity. Legacy. The distinction mattered because it appeared so consistently. Michael seemed preoccupied with the long-term impact of his work rather than immediate recognition. He frequently asked variations of the same question. How can creativity help people? How can imagination inspire children? How can art leave a positive mark on the world? These themes surfaced repeatedly across years of entries. Different projects. Different circumstances. Same underlying purpose. Investigators found the consistency remarkable. It connected nearly everything discovered inside the garage. The vehicles preserved memories. The blueprints documented ambition. The notebooks revealed motivation. Together they created a portrait far more complex than public narratives often suggested. Rather than finding evidence of isolation from the world, investigators found evidence of engagement with ideas. Rather than discovering someone trapped by past achievements, they found someone focused intensely on future possibilities. The notebooks transformed the entire investigation. Suddenly, the garage wasn't merely preserving artifacts. It was preserving a mindset, a way of thinking, a creative philosophy that continued evolving until the very end. And as inventory teams continued their work, they uncovered another layer of the story hidden among seemingly insignificant objects. Scattered throughout shelves, drawers, cabinets, and storage containers sat dozens of personal items that initially appeared unimportant. Yet these discoveries often produced the strongest emotional reactions. Children's drawings had been carefully preserved. Greeting cards occupied protective sleeves. Small gifts rested in dedicated spaces. Travel souvenirs remained stored alongside handwritten notes. None carried extraordinary monetary value. Yet together they revealed something priceless. They showed what mattered to Michael Jackson when cameras weren't watching. Investigators noticed how deliberately many items had been preserved. Some clearly traveled through multiple chapters of his life. Others had been protected for decades. Their survival suggested emotional significance rather than practical value. The pattern reinforced conclusions emerging elsewhere in the garage. Michael wasn't collecting objects because they were expensive. He was preserving memories because they meant something to him. The distinction changed the emotional atmosphere surrounding the investigation. Every shelf felt curated. Every container seemed intentional. Rather than discovering a warehouse of possessions, investigators found an archive of experiences. The smallest objects often carried the largest stories. A simple drawing could reveal more about a relationship than an expensive automobile ever could. A greeting card preserved for years spoke volumes about sentiment and attachment. These discoveries humanized everything else inside the building. The luxury vehicles felt less like status symbols. The creative projects felt less abstract. The notebooks felt more personal. Together they formed a coherent narrative about a man trying to preserve pieces of life that mattered beyond fame. Many investigators later described these items as the emotional heart of the collection. They revealed vulnerability, affection, gratitude, memory, traits often overshadowed by public mythology. As the inventory process approached completion, a surprising consensus emerged among those involved. The true value of the garage wasn't financial. It was historical, emotional, and deeply human. Yet one major question remained unresolved. What would happen to everything they had discovered? News of the findings eventually spread beyond the small circle directly involved in the investigation. Interest exploded almost immediately. Collectors recognized the significance of the vehicles. Museums saw opportunities for exhibitions. Historians understood the importance of the creative material. Financial estimates appeared quickly, and many observers assumed the collection would eventually be divided, auctioned, or displayed publicly. The potential value was enormous. Yet behind the scenes, estate representatives faced a difficult decision. The question extended beyond money. Should the collection remain intact, or should individual pieces be separated and distributed? As discussions continued, a compelling argument emerged. The power of the garage came from context. A single vehicle told only part of the story. A notebook alone lacked important connections. A blueprint separated from surrounding material lost meaning. Together, however, everything formed a complete narrative. Breaking the collection apart would weaken the very thing that made it significant. Eventually, a decision was reached. The garage would be preserved as a unified archive. Every item would be catalogued. Every document would be protected. Every artifact would remain connected to the larger story. For many observers, the choice felt surprising. For those who had explored the building firsthand, it felt inevitable. After all, the investigation had revealed something far more valuable than collectibles. It had revealed continuity. The vehicles, notebooks, keepsakes, and creative materials all pointed toward the same conclusion. Michael Jackson never stopped imagining. Never stopped planning. Never stopped dreaming about what could come next. The forgotten building at Neverland Ranch turned out not to be a vault of secrets. It was a vault of possibilities. Inside its walls, investigators found no explosive scandal, no shocking revelation, and no hidden fortune capable of rewriting history. Instead, they discovered evidence of relentless creativity, deep sentiment, and extraordinary imagination. They found the private map of a life lived beyond the spotlight. And perhaps that was the greatest surprise of all. After years of rumors, speculation, and mystery, the real discovery wasn't what Michael Jackson had hidden. It was who Michael Jackson had been when nobody was watching. Then came another discovery that shifted the investigation in an unexpected direction. Hidden among storage boxes were collections of photographs few people had ever seen. Unlike publicity images or professional portraits, these photographs documented private moments, family gatherings, quiet afternoons, travel experiences, creative brainstorming sessions. Many appeared completely ordinary, yet that ordinariness made them powerful. Public perception often transforms famous individuals into larger-than-life figures. These photographs did the opposite. They revealed everyday moments. Laughter, curiosity, friendship, reflection. Investigators noticed that many images focused not on events but on people. Family members appeared repeatedly. So did close friends and collaborators. Certain photographs were clearly worn from being handled over the years. Others had handwritten notes on the back. Together they added another layer to the story emerging from the garage. Michael's private world seemed built around relationships, creativity, and memory. Fame appeared almost secondary within that environment. The contrast between public image and private reality fascinated those documenting the collection. Here was one of the most recognizable people in history. Yet the objects he chose to preserve often reflected simple human experiences rather than celebrity accomplishments. The discovery reinforced a growing conclusion. The garage functioned less like a vault and more like a personal archive. It wasn't designed to impress visitors. It was designed to protect moments that mattered. As news of the investigation slowly spread among historians and collectors, interest began growing rapidly. Experts recognized the historical significance of what had been found. Museums quietly expressed interest. Archivists discussed potential preservation projects. Collectors speculated about values. Some estimated that certain vehicles alone could command enormous prices if offered publicly. Others focused on the creative documents, arguing they represented a unique glimpse into the mind of one of the most influential entertainers in modern history. Yet despite growing attention, those directly involved in the inventory process continued emphasizing the same point. The true significance of the collection wasn't individual objects. It was context. Every item connected to another. A notebook explained a blueprint. A photograph provided context for a keepsake. A vehicle reflected a particular chapter documented elsewhere in the archive. Separating the pieces would weaken the larger story. That realization eventually shaped discussions about the collection's future. Rather than viewing the contents as isolated assets, many began seeing them as components of a single historical record. The garage had preserved something rare. Not merely possessions, but continuity. A complete narrative stretching across decades of Michael Jackson's life. The longer investigators studied the material, the more valuable that continuity appeared. Perhaps the biggest surprise came from what investigators didn't find. Years of rumors had convinced many people that the garage contained explosive secrets waiting to be uncovered. Some expected scandals. Others anticipated hidden recordings or sensational revelations. None of those predictions proved accurate. Instead, the contents painted a far more nuanced picture. The garage revealed creativity rather than controversy, reflection rather than scandal, vision rather than secrecy. Far from exposing some hidden side of Michael Jackson that contradicted public understanding, the discoveries often reinforced themes visible throughout his career. Imagination, innovation, curiosity, emotional connection. Those qualities appeared everywhere. In the vehicles he preserved. In the projects he developed. In the notes he wrote. In the photographs he kept. The mystery of the garage turned out not to be about shocking revelations. It was about understanding. Understanding how Michael saw himself when nobody was watching. understanding what he valued enough to protect, understanding the ideas that continued motivating him long after he had already achieved unprecedented success. That realization changed the meaning of the discovery entirely. The story was no longer about a hidden building. It was about the private world hidden inside one of the most public lives ever lived. Eventually, discussions turned toward what should happen next. The collection had been documented. Every vehicle catalogued. Every notebook archived. Every photograph preserved. Yet the future of the garage remained uncertain. Some argued portions should be exhibited publicly so fans could better understand Michael's creative process. Others believed the collection should remain largely intact and protected. Whatever decision might ultimately be made, one thing had become clear. The forgotten building had accomplished something remarkable. It had preserved a version of Michael Jackson untouched by headlines, controversies, or public debates. Inside those walls existed a record of imagination in motion. A record of dreams, ambitions, memories, and ideas. When investigators first approached the garage, they expected to uncover objects. What they ultimately found was a story. A story told through vehicles, notebooks, sketches, photographs, and keepsakes. A story about creativity, memory, and the desire to leave something meaningful behind. And perhaps that's why the discovery continues fascinating people today. Because beneath all the mystery, the rumors, and the speculation, the garage revealed something surprisingly simple. The person behind the legend. The individual behind the icon. The dreamer behind the superstar. Long after the doors were opened and the inventory completed, that remains the most powerful discovery of all. Not what Michael Jackson hid inside the garage, but what the garage revealed about Michael Jackson himself.